Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Straight Out of PS Podcast with Rudy and Jamari. I am Rudy Looters, and as usual, on this journey with me is the one and only.
Jamari Jones, everybody. What's going on?
I mean, this is a good question. What's going on? There's a lot going on,
There's a
but
lot going on.
how you holding up today, bro? You know,
Um, is I'm you know
we,
I'm doing well.
we think we
It's
have Hoodie Jamari show up
yeah,
today.
man. It's
You
Hoodie
know,
Jamari today.
yeah.
I'm lounging in the house.
Lounging in the house. You know,
Yeah. Um,
homeowner. You
right,
know,
homeowner,
you know.
just
Man,
chilling. But
chill, man.
yeah, I'm doing well, man. This week has been or last week has been really busy. The kids are back. It's
Yeah,
really been like kind of like really busy.
I bet.
Yeah, kids are just have a lot of pent up energy.
Yeah,
They haven't seen each other. So it's been tough to kind of balance everything. But I'm super excited to be seeing them back in school. This is a big adjustment period for them as well as for me. But personally, I have been good. God has been good. I just been chilling.
yeah. For me, it's just been, I don't know. I just feel like I'm gonna see a roller coaster. It's always like a roller coaster
Yeah.
because with everything's happening, it just you take it when there's so much is happening. The best you can do for yourself is take care of what you can control.
Yeah.
Because if you spend so many stuff focusing on the stuff you cannot control, you're gonna go crazy. So take care of what you can control and figure out how can you contribute to the stuff to make the things that you cannot control better.
Right.
That's the best you can do. And making sure you protect your peace, your happiness, your joy at all times. So it's definitely been a roller coaster, but definitely it was a busy week. Yeah, the kids are back. um I mean, you get them in school, we get them after school when they come in.
Right.
It just it definitely you can definitely feel like they miss being social. Like,
Hmm.
they excited. Like, I mean, they were always excited to be there, but it's just like it's different. It's just like when you go on this a long trip and you sitting together, like you're talking about everything that happened this long trip. That's how I felt. So you catching up from a year, even though we spoke on Zoom, but I just feel like you retelling the story in person because like you get to see the reaction, like because people didn't show their face on Zoom, or
Right.
like it's like that like they miss being social in person, so you can definitely see that. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, they're excited to be out. So it's just about like excited to be out socializing with 6 feet distant and mask up. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to I feel like the problems that we're facing right now in school is like the problems that we usually face in like November, December.
yeah,
They just come sooner. And I think it's because of that time that we miss. And what I'm noticing within students is like one, we have to, like we talked about before, like they have to learn how to be students again. Like some kids may have a hard time staying in class for a
yeah,
long period of time, or like even them learning how to problem solve when
yeah,
they have like miscommunicating miscommunication amongst each other, and instead of like beefing, like usually they're able to solve it within their friend group. But that I'm noticing is a really is has been more difficult for young people right now. And I think it is because like you were saying, they haven't been able to like communicate with one another in person. So that is some from a counselor standpoint has been really tough. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I hope that it gets better as time goes on, and you know we can readjust.
Yeah.
Um, but moving into the episode, me and Rudy just want to thank everyone for your support,
As you go,
and
thank you.
for
Thank you.
yeah, for tuning in with us again, and sharing the podcast. We appreciate it so much. If you haven't already done so, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter. Also like us on Facebook. And we are on all social media platforms as far as the podcast. Um, you can find us on um, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and even Spotify if you are on Spotify. So share the podcast with someone, and make sure you listen to last episode. This is the two,
Yes.
part two to the episode.
Yeah.
So if you haven't listened to part one, go back and listen to it. It's really, really dope. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so with that being said, we are gonna go into the views from the latest news.
What we
Um,
got today, Jamar?
so we got three things. And the first thing is something that we talked about a lot, the preliminary results from the mayoral race.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think, my brother?
Wow. 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 Yes,
Exactly my words. Wow.
the primary result happened. There was five candidates, and now we have two, and it's between the two. Those two candidate will be one of the two will be the mayor of Boston. Just a reminder that the last day to register. So if you didn't register for in time for the preliminary, the last day to register for election is October 13 at 8 p.m.
Hmm.
It's the last day to register to be available to vote on November 2nd. And also, this is a reminder this is not just a mayoral election. This is also there's councilor at large election, and there's and district council uh, as well. Um, as I said, two of the two there's two candidates for now. There's only two candidates left for the mayor of to be mayor of Boston, and two of the finalists are at large council. So it is very important. There's like when we think about not just the mayor, the council, there are eight candidates left for the uh, um, there are candidate. There was like 17 or 19 after
Hmm.
the preliminary election. There are eight candidate left for the at-large council. So which four of the eight are better to be a voice for us and a system that was not built for us? So this is a question we need to ask ourselves.
Hmm.
And additionally, the work doesn't end after the election. Accountability is next, and we need to define what accountability looks like. Um, and or what accountability looks like, or what accountability should look like.
Yeah.
So let's stay the course. Let's vote and let's hold them accountability. And let's hold them accountable, because this is everything we do is political. The change we want to make, like
Yeah.
who are the people we can trust to help us for a better BPS, a better Boston for people of color.
Right.
So with that being said, the results. So unfortunately, there will not be a black mayor.
Hmm.
You know, um, but it's regardless of how the preliminary came, like the result. Now we need to move on and figure out, who, like I say, who's the best candidate for um that we feel like can be a voice for us in the rooms when we're not there. So it's between Michelle Wu and Anissa Esabi George.
Hmm.
So do your research, do your homework, I often say when you think about voting,
Hmm.
like the candidate are not all gonna match what you want, but you have to also understand what their priority are, and also how can who who you're gonna vote for, how the person you're gonna vote gonna benefit you and your community, and also understand who your community is,
Right.
you know, and also understand like this is about like there's it's a diverse community, like and not just like you don't want one side to benefit and the other, like so how can every community, when I say community, Boston in general, not just one neighborhood, like how can we all benefit, how can that one person be a representation of all of us and be a voice for all of us, and also thinking about the counselor, how can they also hold the mayor, who can you put in office who can also hold the mayor accountable. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm not gonna front. I am really disappointed that we were
Tell
not
him how you
able
feel, Jamari.
that we were not able to get a black woman in
And
that
oh,
mayor seat.
oh, oh, you're not gonna find a black woman, so I know.
Yeah.
Mm.
So but with that being said, and also like the results of how many people actually showed up and voted,
Yeah.
I'm on like, yo, where we at as a people, as a community?
Some
Um,
people don't believe the election work, and
yeah,
I don't know. So I'm gonna say this again. Hoya Mayhem won by one vote.
right. One, she
One
called herself
vote.
the one vote wonder.
One vote. If this is not a clear example, I don't know. Like and I understand. So that's still blame because the system we don't believe because of so I don't say we I believe,
Yeah,
but
right,
I understand like why some people don't believe in the system,
right.
because if they done you wrong so many times, like
Hmm.
like why should you now, like
Yeah,
what's the different from now. But we got to find a way to make people believe.
right.
We got to find a way to make people buy in, like and people gonna start buying in the more they see us in those
Yeah,
streets, like oh, like we have made a lot of progress. I'm looking at like how much representation we have, and like it's not enough, but there's been a lot of progress, and we need
yeah,
to keep making more progress. um yeah, it's unfortunate, but hey, we have to work with whoever you know
right. So I mean, with that being said, I am happy that we are gonna get a woman of color
yeah.
in that seat. Um, but like you said, now uh, it comes down to um, who is gonna be the best choice to represent us or you or your community, and who's going to fit that mold. um so I'm very interested, and I just want someone that's going to represent myself and my students and my community the best way that they can. um but yeah, it I was kind of shocked in the results.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and also the split voting that I wanted to bring up. Like we already know, like there was too many, like the votes were split amongst the African American like candidates. Like,
So you saying there was three black candidates in the vote were split?
yeah.
Yeah. So
If I'm just like, yo, can we work together to
I
unify one person?
I understand.
Yeah,
I understand how, but but there's also no guarantee that the people who voted for those black
yeah,
were voting for color. One,
yeah,
two. Um, I don't like this argument because you never hear that when there's two white candidate running, or like
right, right, right.
so. I I'm not gonna say who. I do believe there's one person who should have been in the race.
Mm-hmm.
There was one too many, but I'm not gonna say it's because we didn't win because of split vote.
Right.
And I understand why people may think that because the number of vote is our number of black vote are already low. So like so from it being low, not like we're splitting it. I can understand the argument, but we
Yeah.
have to go to a place where like it's go back to how can we get more people to trust the system
Mm-hmm.
to buy in. So like so let's see if everybody voted, right? If everybody in Boston voted and it was still the same result. So what would the counter argument is? Like
Yeah.
um I and I understand what you're saying. Like I understand what the people argument. I do also understand like there was a few too many people in this election.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's my personal, So yeah,
No, I see what you're saying. But yeah, I also think that there was too many people in this election. But I mean that's neither here or there, and we are where we are right
yeah,
now.
because if you look at even the people who joined and withdrew, they were still getting vote.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't get that thing.
yeah. They shouldn't be able to.
Why, I don't get it. Like, why if you withdrew, why are you still getting vote?
Yeah. So
So it's just
it
you
is what
know.
it is.
And I remember, I think it was about 90, 92 or 90 writing. 92 people either wrote their name or was somebody else. So that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm all set with that. I
Yeah.
should have wrote my name in. No, I'm just kidding. Um. So something else that we have on is the Haitian immigrants at the border. This is nuts, man. Like, I don't know what this administration is like thinking, but what I haven't done a lot of research because I read a little bit about it, but there were like officers on horses, like with whips or like the things that you use for the horse, but like actually whipping like Haitians that were like just trying to live, bro. And so which is crazy. And like then I heard a clip on I think I was listening to Brilliant Idiots, and they actually played the clip from I forget the lady's name from the Biden administration and saying that our
Oh,
officers will not be on horses anymore. All this other stuff. What you on horses for, bruh? Like, it's just nuts, man. It's nuts. It's racism.
it's crazy. Seeking asylum should not be illegal. So
Yeah,
when you riding high on your horse and people are trying to come out of the water, seeking asylum, and not even non-threatening, like they like instead of like helping them get out of the water and just making sure they're okay until we figure out what to do with them, the first thing that comes to your mind for you to whip them back into water. So this is when we say like this is a system thing, like it's
yeah.
like because
Especially when we're probably the cause of the turmoil in Haiti, like
I'm
America.
I'm glad you say that because we have been through a lot. Haiti has been through a lot. And people always often say Haiti is the poorest country in the hemisphere, like poorest country in the world. But nobody asks how, why.
Mhm.
How do you go from being the first Black republic to the poorest country in the world?
Right.
Nobody asks why. And and as we having discussion about reparation,
Hmm.
we had to do reverse reparation. We had to pay $21 billion to France for our freedom.
Mm.
Jamari, Do you know who the debt collectors? Like, what do you know of debt collectors?
I don't know. I don't have them problems.
Oh,
So,
good for you.
no.
Good for you. So when you owe money and then whatever wherever you owe money, like they pay people to go get their money and they get a
Right.
fee from getting your money, right? So they sell your account. They're like, oh, Jamari owe me some money. So I don't have time to arrest Jamari for that money.
Got you.
So I'm gonna sell you that account. So you pay me what Jamari owes me, or you pay me a portion of it. Go arrest Jamari. When you get that money from Jamari, you get a fee, I get a fee, we all win.
Yeah.
So when Haiti was paying $21 billion to France for their freedom, because France was so mad they lost Haiti, and Haiti went from making them a lot of money, and then now they lost the richest colony, so they wanted their money back.
Mm.
Guess who was the debt collector for France when this was happening?
America.
America. So part of that $21 billion, America got paid.
That's crazy.
So America gets involved in Haitian politics, and now people are seeking asylum. It's also crazy because as a Haitian, like we've been through so much, from earthquake, political unrest, and everything. And you hear all the things happening in the world, and then you question, like So the question was like, oh, America is accepting Afghan refugee, and then why can't they accept Haiti? Like it's just like now you question, like which one deserves, like it's like they're pitting us Haitian and Afghan together against each other, like, oh, between the two of you, which one deserve it? I'm like,
Yeah.
and that's not fair. And I'm like, we both deserve it. Like who am I to? And that's the thing, like like when you're trying to go and like value who's who needs the most, or who's
You
in the better situation. It's
like
just,
you can't measure that.
you can measure survival.
Yeah.
How do you measure survival? Like it's just crazy to me. And then it went from, oh well, the Afghan are coming here because they did this for America, and then, oh, so Haiti never done anything for America.
Which
So
is wild.
it's just wild, So but it might not be during my lifetime, man. But Haiti will stand tall again.
Yeah.
Haiti will stand tall,
And I'm hoping that, we come to our senses and recognize, especially the government, man. Like when you're outright like racist, and like you can't you can't put money, or you can't put a measure on someone that's trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I mean, to bring this to an educational standpoint, um I know that we're gonna probably see an influx of um Haitian students, especially in my school.
Yeah.
And I hope the school system is ready to handle like the trauma that students have been that are coming from Haiti, or the families that come from Haiti are dealing with. And that we can, with this money that we're getting, right, the educational system is getting, like we can kind of use that to help, families and everything like that, or
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
So really, really, we are praying for Haiti, hoping that, you know we can come to some sort of like agreement, and they can open our borders to them, and they could be safe here at least.
Yeah.
And even when we say that, are they really safe here? Are they going to be treated fairly? These are all questions that you know we should be asking, and you know demanding that they do be treated fairly. But going on to our next topic, and last topic, is Hispanic Heritage Month. This month is Hispanic Heritage Month, and I know for us, we in this episode we have two um well, if you haven't listened to the last episode, make sure you go listen. We have two Latin American young women that are in education, that are doing the work, and me and Rudy wanted to kind of celebrate that by having them on and for them to talk about their experiences, but also uh, just to bring it back to like BPS. I'm hoping, and I haven't seen it yet, that there's a bigger celebration or recognizing of Hispanic Heritage Month. And I know my school has done a little something, um, but I just miss the days when we had assemblies, you know what I mean? To celebrate different cultures. And I know we can't do that because of COVID and all this other stuff, but it wasn't happening before. But I want to bring it back to, actually celebrating the different cultures within BPS is what I'm thinking about. And I remember when I was in high school at BPS, we would have Hispanic Heritage Month like assemblies, and like there'll be dances, food, culture, like different culture things. And there was poems, there was raps, and like in Spanish or anything like that. And I think that is something that we are lacking within BPS, just because it's not happening at my school or at different other schools doesn't mean it's not happening anywhere. But I do feel like once we start building that community, um, and building that kind of interest within everyone, I think that it would be good for our culture, for our morale, for acceptance of everyone. And that just doesn't go for Hispanic Heritage Month, but I think it goes for celebrating all cultures.
Yeah, yeah, definitely that. But also, like, as we think about, like, and we talk about this, yes, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and regardless of, like, what is Black history, Haitian history, regardless of the culture, we need to find a way to have those culture more inclusive in our
Mhm.
curriculum all year round, and not just on Hispanic heritage, because he's like, cultural contribution to American history cannot be limited to just 30 days, like,
Right.
so we need to find out, like, how can we bring those culture, integrate those culture in our environment and our system, so we
Mm.
celebrate the kids, so they see themselves and the thing they learn, like, because, like, I'm all for uh celebration, representation, like, the assembly, but we need to do more. And also, like, you have to understand the population you work with,
Mhm.
so which, like, how many Puerto Rican, Dominican, like, Guatemalan, Honduran, like,
El
um
Salvadorian.
like, like you
Yeah.
have in your school, and, like, that those do they that those do some dive in those culture, and figure out who you have, like,
Mhm.
because it's worth it, like, when students see their culture
Mhm.
celebrated all year round, when, like, when students see the people wanted to learn, know more about their culture, they're
Mhm.
excited to showcase, to share out, like,
Mhm.
and not just like, oh, for 30 days we're gonna be up in this, and then after that we don't want to know anything about your culture. That's not fair. Like,
Yeah.
we talk about American history every day, but American history include also cultural history, and they need to be inclusive in every thing we do, so
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, one of our things for this year, or for the season, is advocacy. So, um, we got to find ways on how to push that needle forward.
yes.
And whether it's just us, like we usually do, like posting about it, or spreading the word, or giving out statistics to help people have more information, we're gonna do. And that's just a little bit of change, but hopefully it grows into something bigger. And as our platform gets bigger, we will continue to do.
With that being said, up next is part 2 of our conversation with Jennifer Salazar and Maria Alejandra Mosqueda. Welcome back, everyone. We are back with our two guests, Jennifer Salazar and Alejandra Mosqueda. So, Hispanic Heritage Month is just a few days away. This is the time when we see a rise in school showcasing and celebrating Latinx contribution to our American history. We believe that cultural celebration should be centered in school all year and not just all year round, not just for 30 days. In your opinion, what are some examples where Hispanic culture can be centered in a curriculum while also being showcased in those 30 days? And we can start with Alejandra.
So yeah, so this question is loaded. I think it's loaded because as a Latina, I feel like yes, we could do a lot. We could first of all, if we approach something with a collectivist mindset, you're including a lot of identities in that. And some of our kids, especially when we think about high schoolers, like we should be having conversations about colorism. We should be having conversations about the things that our community actually struggles with, not just like, oh, here's I don't even know anymore. Like I'm so disconnected from Hispanic heritage in terms of from an academic perspective, because growing up it will always be very much like the same people, right? The same famous people. You'll have maybe Celia Cruz once, and then you have Gloria Stefan, right? The whiteness within that celebration is real. That and being able to sustain, talk about real topics and celebrate kids in a way that it's inclusive and know your population. I think Latinx month, like if the majority of your kids are Dominican, Puerto Rican, you should be talking about that. The majority of your kids are Guatemalan and Salvadorians. We need to bring that in more, right? So then you need to be talking about the indigenous communities in Central America. If you need to talk about, if we're Dominican, Puerto Rican, then we need to talk about how the Tainos no longer exist on our islands, and the tensions that happen between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. Like we really need to be able to give historical context. And we are a colonized community. Let's not forget that, right? And whiteness still is a thing, right, within our community. And oppression because of color is very much present in a lot of our countries, right? So I think it's being able to have real conversations with our kids where like they're celebrated, right? And they know like Afro Latino is a term, and I'm gonna tell you why it's important for you to sustain that for yourself, right? And I think that piece is, how can we incorporate it? I would say if I had like clear measurables, would be having like real historical context and doing like a in history. I think is the biggest place we could do it. And also like when celebration comes, having kids be able to share where they come from. And I think in the arts and specialties, that's also an opportunity for us to show kind of our culture is very musical. Our culture is very like being able to do that, but we don't have those opportunities because we can't even hire people who just do bachata, right? Or we can't even hire, like it's not a thing. They need to go to some sort of school and get some sort of degree, which is not what we do. So being able to incorporate in these different spaces is key, and having kids be able to kind of let you know what they celebrate and what's important to them. I mean, they know. We come in knowing. I when did I know I was Puerto Rican? When I was 4. So I think kids coming knowing how they want to be celebrating and what does that mean.
Yeah, I think oftentimes and it's not just with Latino Heritage Month, I think any of these months, right, whether it's like Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month or Black History Month, yep. It usually goes around like dance our dance, eat our food, look at our music, yay. Yeah. And that's beautiful, right? Like I love me, oh my God, Rudy, remember when you brought me those Haitian beef patties? Those are on point. So like the food part is great, but there's so much more to the culture than just the food and the dance and the music, right? And I think Alejandra was totally hitting the nail on the head when she was talking about like, let's dive deeper, especially, with Latino culture, it's so diverse. but often gets kind of blanketed as this like just one thing, right? And there's so many levels of complexity depending on the region that we're talking about, depending on like Central Americans differ from South Americans, right? And Caribbean Latin folk differ from the American Latin folk. And then what does it mean to be Puerto Rican versus New Yorican, right? Like there's so many different identities within the Latin community. Knowing your community, knowing your population of students is huge, and diving into some of the not so fun parts of the culture, right? The harder parts of the culture, having the harder conversations. And then amplifying voices that do not get heard enough at all. Another big issue that like grinds my gears as a Latin educator is that when we talk about Latin history or Latin folks in general in curriculum, it's like either we're talking immigration or we're talking Cesar Chavez and the Farm Workers Union. Like that is it. And the reality is, and I experienced this as a kid going through New York City public school, I didn't learn about the influence and impact of Latin soldiers in the Civil War. I didn't even know they existed, because US history is often so taught in this Black and white dichotomy that if you are not Black and if you are not white, like European white,
Yeah.
your history doesn't really get taught, right? We don't learn about the influence of Latina suffragists for the women's suffrage movement in the United States. There was a lot of activism of Latina women, especially in the southwestern part of the US, to make women's suffrage happen, right? To fight for the right to vote for women. There was a lot of Asian women fighting for the right to vote for women, right? Oftentimes we don't hear those voices because US history is so very much taught in this Black and white dichotomy. There's, you know, all these other groups of people that fall in the gray zone. And so I think history teachers have a huge responsibility to make sure that the history that they're teaching and the resources that they're using are not just by white folks. I think ELA teachers have a huge responsibility in making sure that the books they choose are not the quote unquote, you know, traditional canon books that are supposed to be like the end all be all of literature, all happen to be, you know, like 90% of them written by white men, right? We need to diversify the access and also change the mindset of like, what is proper literature? Right? Because that's also a huge problem in education and a huge way in which white supremacy keeps getting kind of promoted, right? Like this is what good literature is. No, like you can also look at Elizabeth Acevedo and read her books and like really learn a lot about identity and culture there too, right? So there's a lot of ways, even like math teachers, math, so much of it was developed in Asia and what we call, you know, like the Arab Peninsula and Africa. Like, let's bring that history into those math classrooms too, right? It's not just the Pythagorean theorem. Sorry, math teachers. That's all I remember right now. That's what came to mind. But there's a lot of ways in which we do it. And it's hard, sure, because the traditional educational narrative is very white and very male-centered, but it's doable. Like we have a responsibility to make sure that cultures, and not just Latin culture, but all cultures are getting represented in our history.
Like I hear like it's complex, it's hard, and maybe that's why people tend to stay away from them. But also, like Alejandra said, like get to know your students. Like the more you get to know your population, it kind of gives you, because you can educate people with like knowing the population like you serving, also while also educating, this is a small portion, this is based on the population we're serving, and not like focus on a micro level, and not so there's also a huge vast complex like of knowledge out there that you also can go and print them to resources. Like I feel like because of the complexity, people tend to stay away from there. Just like, hey, 30 days, we're gonna get food from 30 different small business this week. They're gonna cater to us. This is how we celebrate, and then see y'all next year.
And like I think, and that's why like I think anti-racism needs to be the forefront of everything. And like we need to be able to name certain things that we practice in our culture. Like anti-Blackness is something that's practiced within our culture. And so being able to name that anti-Black racism is something that Latinx folk can perpetuate, and being able to name things that, you know, it's very much, it's steamed in oppression, right? And having or giving our kids like the concept of pelo malo, I have bad hair, right? And so those are acts of anti-Blackness. And so for us to have real conversations with our kids and being like, no, tu pelo no es malo, like it's not bad. This is what your hair means, right? And so those are real conversations that we also need to have that we might not have the language for. And I did, Jennifer, I wanted to add that, you know how you were talking about literature, and also something I struggle with is the concept of vernacular. Like, what is right Spanish? Right? Because I'm Puerto Rican, my Spanish is not right. That's also an act of anti-Blackness, because we had, the Caribbean had most of the slaves coming outside of Brazil. So I think people, we, you know, what is proper Spain Spanish? Like my Spanglish is validated. Like it's valuable. Like how I speak it, it's because it shows that I've had to navigate two worlds, that I've had to learn two cultures, that I've had to acculturate and assimilate in order to live in white supremacy. So as I'm unlearning it and learn to survive in it, it's still valuable, right? And so I think I struggle with the vernacular piece too, where like, well, this is if it's not from Spain, if it's not from Mexico, right? And I think we just make Mexico sound exotic, unfortunately, in literature, just because it's like, it's a little bit more brown, here you go, so we don't have to give you all Spain. And so I think that's also key, and letting our kids know, yeah, you could say, como tú, instead of saying como tú estás, you could say como tú estás, right? You could, that doesn't mean nothing wrong, right? That you eat your S's. Like our dialects are beautiful and they're there for a reason. And I think very much like in the Black community, vernacular is something we need to honor too. Is the same thing within our Latinx community, and educators do. I remember being in school and educators, you know, correcting us in the moment of like, well, that's not how you're supposed to say it. So how am I supposed to say it? What are you telling me? I learned my language wrong, right? So I think that's also a key thing, and then letting kids live in their truth and celebrating that in those ways as well.
You know what's so interesting when you say that? I remember when I was in high school and I was taking Spanish too, and then three students, they failed the Spanish class. I'm like, you guys speak Spanish, well, how you failing Spanish? It's like, no, because they want us to speak it that way, we speak it that way, which was so crazy to me. Like they literally failed the class. Wow.
I failed a few at Center Jamar. Spanish classes, like I got a C in one. I'm like, what?
Yeah, but that Spanish class was kind of crazy. But another thing I wanted to bring up real quick is that you know, when you guys were talking about highlighting not just like the food and you like where you come from and all this other stuff, is like you got to highlight the statistics too, like that we have within BPS. And me and Rudy were working on a post to like celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, and like I was finding all these statistics in BPS, and I'm all like, I was conflicted because I'm all like, we're supposed to be celebrating this group of people, and like I'm putting these statistics in the post, but it's like, and then Rudy was like, you know, we have to bring awareness to this, even though it's like a negative aspect. Like this year, our focus, or this season, our focus is on advocacy, and that is a part of advocacy. And it just made me change my perspective on like when we're creating like this material, teaching people, like it can't just be all the good stuff. It has to be some of the stuff that we need to improve as well. So thank you guys for bringing that up, and thank you, Rudy, for highlighting that too when we were going through this and creating the post. So for our next question, in the Uneven Path report, which was published pre-pandemic in 2019, it revealed that although the BPS overall graduation rate increased, ELL students, Black and Latino students, were graduating at a lower rate than their white and Asian peers. Based on your experience, what have you seen that contributed to these differences in graduation rates? what have you seen are some best practices in supporting students in this demographic to graduate from high school? And Jen, we can start with you.
I think this is very much connected to what we had been talking about earlier about the pandemic, and all of a sudden we were able to get things that we had been asking for in schools for a long time. But I don't think it's a shocker to anyone to say that BPS, there's a lot of segregation in BPS, right? Like, let's keep it real. And some schools get access to things that the majority of other schools don't get access to, right? Some schools, get certain electives and certain pathways and opportunities and access to technology and programming that other schools don't. And so I think what we're seeing is essentially the fallout from that, right? Like, what happens when we do not invest equitably in all of our students and in all of our schools?
Yeah.
And this is where we start to see that, right? We also, BPS has a history of being sued by the federal government for not supporting all students, right? Whether it's students with learning disabilities or whether it's students who are ELL students. And so oftentimes, and I think you used this term, Jamari, earlier, oftentimes we find Band-Aid solutions to bigger problems, right? We try to find the cheapest way to make it work and float until it doesn't. And that's oftentimes what we see. And our kids, especially our ELL kids, our Black and Latino youth, are often the ones that kind of suffer the most. And even if we step outside of BPS, just even as a state, I mean, the response of school districts during the pandemic and the failure of the state to really kind of jump in and mitigate and figure out how we can make school equitable for all kids across the Commonwealth, I think is a huge part of it as well, right? Because even though the school buildings closed down in Boston, there were school buildings in Catholic schools and private schools that still stayed open.
Yeah.
Because they had figured out ways to mitigate the situation and keep their kids healthy. And let's keep it real, their infrastructure was much better than a lot of the decrepit buildings in our district. Right. And so, yes, I think we did the right thing in keeping our kids out of the buildings until we had at least air purifiers in there. And until the weather at least got a little bit warmer for us to crack open windows and do those things that we needed to do. But it wasn't fair, right? Because there are kids in whatever W town you want to bring up or N town who were in school still, who had masks, who had technology, who had like air filtration, LEED certified buildings,
right,
where their education wasn't as disrupted as our kids. And so I think the pandemic is scary for lots of reasons. I think something that some educators were holding their breaths for with the pandemic was that this was an opportunity to reimagine education and to reimagine school. And what an epic failure of not just our city and our state and our country as a whole, right? That we did not take this as an opportunity to reinvent school and to make school work for students and families,
right,
especially those in our communities who would benefit the most. And when one person benefits, like one community, we can all benefit, right? Like we need to uplift each other. And I think that goes back to Alejandra's point about looking at this as a community and not just as an individual.
Yeah.
I agree, Jen. Like, unfortunately, these stats are not surprising, right? And that kind of brings me back to that teacher telling me, "Don't be another statistic," right? And I think, we're just racist. I mean, there's no other way around that, right? The system is just so racist at this point, and how do we all be like? And racism happened collectively, and to undo it, it needs to happen collectively. And that's just kind of like, I now keep repeating that because I think people don't understand that. It's a collective effort. It's just not, if it was the loudest voice that moved us along, we would have been over this, but it's not the loudest voice. It is not the consistent voice. It is the collectivism in it. And so when we think of our kids and how do we support them, it's like a lot of our ELL kids internalize the ability. They believe, there's a process where they believe that not knowing English means you're stupid. How do we allow that to live in any space, right? You don't know English, therefore you're stupid. And that is, having an accent or not knowing English does not equate to intellect. Some of these kids are probably more advanced coming from their countries than what they receive here.
That's true.
So yeah. I think that obviously kids internalize that narrative, and viewing our kids as lazy or kids that like, well, the Latino culture just doesn't value education. That's not true, right? And these are things that we perpetuate when we kind of engage with our kids and our families. Another thing that should be done is like, again, your structure and your strength and supporting this child is from the family. So if grandma's the one that picks him up, if it's godmother that picks him up, if it's aunt, if it's the neighbor, those people care for this one child, right? Especially where I work, a lot of the kids be like, oh, I'm picking her up for this person. Like there is a base of community, especially for the children's safety. So we need to use that as well for their education and getting them to where they need. Right. And so a lot of this is, it's not surprising. And advocacy looks like just believing that we come with a lot of dopeness as well. And we could use those attributes to get to where the kids need to be. Right. And accountability is part of it. Right. And accountability comes when you having a good relationship with your families. I realize a big part of this is like building relationship, which is like the whole thing with the cry-op. And people are like still figuring out how to embed it. Yep. But that family building and that unit zero is key. Because they're not like, they want to know who you are. They just don't know how to ask who you are. I know it sucks to get an interpreter sometimes. Find somebody in your building if it really means that you need to meet this family. Like those are things that like really matter. The gestures, like we might not be able to understand language. We understand, but there's a lot of other ways we communicate. Gestures, tone, all this matters. And all this can bridge a connection with our families. So then our kids don't have to feel like they're deficient. And you're right, it's resources. So what do you do if you have an ELL kid who's Latinx with a disability? Now you have 3 different things that this child has to navigate, right? Just it's these intersectional identities are key for us to kind of start molding them to believe like you are capable, you are worthy, you are loved. But that comes with us also coming into the space and knowing that they have more to bring and honoring that. I think it's honoring that. And I think we fail in honoring a lot of this. So why would I show up to a school that doesn't honor me? It doesn't make sense. And if I'm going to check out, I'm going to check out. So absolutely. I think those are the ways we could definitely advocate.
It's so interesting to say that because like family engagement is so key, but we use family engagement such as a punitive way. Even though like when people hear, oh, the school call, oh, did he get in trouble? The first thing that comes to mind is like a student got in trouble. Like we don't communicate for the good thing, for like we don't reach out to the student parent. Even having some student who parents work 24/7 to make ends meet, oh, they work all the time. Them working all the time doesn't mean they don't care. They have to provide for their kids. And just finding we don't care to finding ways around that to meet them what they have, like, you know. So yeah, family engagement and like it takes a village. You said it. So and using the family skills to get the kids on board. I remember somebody, I forgot who I was talking, they were giving me an example of where a system felt a kid. It was like this kid was interested to an after school program. I think it was robotics, and but out of the group of friends, all the friends were interested in some other thing, and the student was so good at robotics. So instead of like getting the friend on board to come join, they just the program and just involve the family. It just let the student go and was like didn't even like try to do anything. While the like a good example of like, oh, talk to the family, talk to the friend, get the friend on board, just like because you understand what's important with the student is to be with the friend and to do the program. And why can we find a way to have both? Those students can have both, so they can, because if they're really excelling at the program. So yeah, family engagement is definitely key, and we need to do better at it. Talking about advocacy, as you may know, there's MBP has 42.5% of students are Latinx, while only 13% of the staff is Latinx. And I feel like everything we've been talking about, like, being people of color, there comes a lot of intentionality in our practice because we know we've been in those seats. So would you agree that cultural representation plays a role in advocacy? If so, what should advocacy look like for Latinx and BPS with these stats in mind? We can start with Alejandra.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think we know representation does matters. And so I think though when we're trying to hire folks, right, we can't, I do feel like we use the way we're trying to create these diversity initiatives and how we use them is kind of also not, there's so many people we could build up to these positions we need because most of, at least in my building, most of my BIPOC folks are our paras, right? And how do we build for them to become teachers? How do we build them the opportunity to be more? How do we give them motivation to want to be more? It's not because it's not lack of aspirations. I don't necessarily want to work for a building or work hard for a building that's not necessarily values me and my body. So all these things kind of play a role. And yes, I do feel like when we can advocate for more roles that represent our student body is key. But we live in a system that believes that race is a sacrifice for talent. So if we amplify, race as the thing, then talent is not, they don't go hand in hand with that's not true. Right. And so a lot of, just because someone doesn't have a degree doesn't mean they can't work hard and come and sit at the table. And so those are just,
yes, thank you for saying that.
yeah, but we do mute our own people. So these equity initiatives or these diversity initiatives is diversity for who? To make who what? To check a box. It's not for us. And then the ones you do have, you're not retaining because you're burning us out. You're not using us adequately. You're not giving us the resources. So then our kids are constantly, kids who are already experiencing racism from external factors, they come into our building and they're like, well, why am I going to get attached to you if you're going to leave me anyways? Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those things where, like, in order to advocate for more representation, we need to really dig and make it anti-racist, where we're talking about these things in an open manner and realizing that I'm looking for a Latinx teacher. No, how do I build one? How do I give somebody the motivation to sit in this space and be that person? How do I get somebody to go, like, I'm gonna give you your own classroom and have you be how do I build that person? And how do I, sometimes we're investing in the wrong things. And so obviously I always thought it was funny that we look in general, not just BPS, but like for diversity, let's diversify our staff. Let's do this, let's do that. When, only like 5% of like Latinx make it to grad school, or like only us I'm not sure the stat, but a lot of us don't graduate. We don't make it to college, right? We're not supported there. So you're pushing on something that a pool that's very small might not exist when you have a bunch of people that are giving you all and you're just not validating them because they don't meet the expectations that you created that continue to perpetuate racism. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's kind of where the role for advocacy of more Latinx in the spaces need to happen. And I do feel like there needs to be a real investment in who comes who brings what to the table. And who could, and how people get involved in our community. I feel like there's a lot of future and potential within the families we engage in. And to be part of that and to sit at our tables and to be able to pick who their teachers are going to be. But we really, in order to create this level of equity, we also need to recognize how even this diversity and inclusion stuff could be an equity detour when you choose how to manifest it, when you choose, well, we're going to hire more Latinx and this is the criteria. So are you doing that just to check a box, or are you doing that because our kids need to be able to, I need to be able to look at a kid and whoa, no, right? I could be that. So what are we doing? And so I think absolutely. So representation does matter. And in order for us to advocate for these roles, we got to really motivate the ones we have and create retention and sustainability. And it needs to be realistic. And it can't be just to make the white man happy.
Right.
Well, I think we should all vote for Alejandra for mayor in our upcoming election, just saying. I think she nailed so much of it. I mean, the amount of engineers that I've met from Guatemala who are Uber drivers here because of whatever educational BS, their degrees don't transfer here for whatever reason, or the amount of doctors from DR that I've met who are running the bodega on the corner, right? Like there's so much talent, but because we in this society, in this country, have created barriers and have deemed some people in some countries worthy and some not worthy, right? Like we waste a lot of talent that exists in our communities tremendously. And I think getting to Alejandra's point, like we try to force people into these, like trying to force a square into a circular peg, right? Instead of creating the position around the person's strength, is often a huge challenge in our community. Accessibility, I will keep saying it until I'm blue in the face. And I don't mean just like the traditional pathway of like going to college and getting a degree and but like financial accessibility. Like not all of us can afford college, right? Not everybody can go. Student loan debt in this country is unbelievable for the people that do end up going to college, right? And so what are other pathways that we can create for our community to come in and be part of the school community and be able to represent all different languages? I mean, there's so much need in our communities for diverse people, for multilingual people, and we shut them out because of the barriers that we create. It's the most ridiculous thing. It's literally like we're shooting ourselves in the foot here. I think what Latinx people too, I mean, I remember when I started teaching, the first position that was ever offered to me when I graduated teaching was to teach Spanish. Even though I had zero training in how to teach a language, and my degree was in political philosophy and social studies.
Wow.
That's wild.
Right? Wow. And so it's like, I said no to that, even though I didn't have another job offer anywhere, because I was like, I do not want to teach Spanish. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I wanted to teach the thing that made me passionate and excited. And for me, that was history, right? And so even when you do kind of jump some of the barriers, then there's like this detour sign that sometimes gets thrown at you, right? And so I think that can be, and that's true of not just Latin folks, but all, folks who, I know teachers who were interested in teaching ELA and who were like, oh wait, but you speak Mandarin? Do you think you could do it like in a Mandarin elective and and like take on this extra prep? And people are like, no, I don't want to do that. Like that's not what I'm applying for here, it is imperative that we have more school leaders and more people that represent our community in school buildings, because I think another part of that's connected to this idea of the graduation rates being so different is like there's still a lot of fear in Latino communities around things like immigration and documentation, right? And so the ability to have people in school buildings with whom they can have that confidential conversation with and say like, hey, this is my truth, this is my reality, I got this paper in the mail, what does this mean? Like when the census came out a few years ago, so many of my Latino, parents and families were like, should I fill this out? I'm scared, I'm concerned, And like, who does that hurt more than anyone but our own communities, because we're not getting the count that we need to get some more of those resources. But again, there's so much fear, and rightfully so, especially after our last administration, like presidential administration, like there's so much fear still, and because we don't have as many folks from the community in these school buildings and in these positions of leadership and power, it's harder. It's just plain and simple, just plain hard. It's harder, it's scarier. So we need more pathways, and we need to dismantle the traditional systems in which we determine who's worthy and not worthy of being in schools. Another barrier, for example, are the MTELs, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like, fine, get rid of the test. Fine, you want the test, you want to make sure these people can teach whatever, fine, that's fine. But why do we have to pay $125 for these damn tests when we're just trying to get into public schools to help our kids?
Yeah.
Like, especially in a career that is vomiting educators, like people are fleeing education in droves, right? There are places around this country where there's a huge, huge lack of teachers.
Yeah.
Why are we making this so complicated and so difficult?
Right.
Like, it makes zero sense. But anywho, let me get off my soapbox.
Yeah, thank you. This is, yeah, it's those conversations are needed. We need to understand. But also we having those conversation, and also with a sense of like activism and action that we need to like, it needs to happen right now. Yeah.
And I wanted to add, Jen, like you're completely right. I didn't even think about that. Like that barrier of the test.
Yeah.
And who's the test built for? And who says that education is meant to look this way? So I totally hear that. And I think even as a social worker, we have to take our LCSW or LICSW. And even those tests, like all my Black and brown folks have to take it more than one. I know people who have spent 7 years trying to pass the test, and their social work skills are amazing. And just literally going into the space, you have to think, what would a white woman think? And that's not our truth, because that's not who we serve. Right. So and these tests are just definitely something that is built to keep us down. And then that's kind of contrary to this initiative of let's diversify, but let's diversify at a very slow pace, right?
Right. Yeah, I can speak to that as well. Even to get into grad school, we had to take like our MTELs or whatever, and I'm all like, but I was working as a guidance counselor, but under a different, like hired as a like something else before, but my school was allowing me to go to grad school and do the work as well, and giving me that grace period, that those 2 years to get my license. But I had to take the MTEL like 3 or 4 times because they were asking me about some like English like skills, like stuff that I don't use. I mean, I do use it, but I didn't really understand like, what is this? How to pay for a class to help me pass the MTEL. But in my head, I'm like, I'm already doing the work. Like half of this stuff I don't even use on a day-to-day. And I'm like writing recommendations and all this stuff. And I'm all like, I don't even want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? Like, go through that process. But I think it's something, and I also talk to a lot of teachers where, you know, they're still taking their like history MTELs or whatever and have to retake it, but they're like teaching it already. They're like, I'm doing a good job. It's just this barrier. And like, who is this really for? Just to show that, you know, you can take a test. So.
And honestly, like, you know, a lot of those MTELs are all rooted in theory and theoretical concepts that were mostly developed by white folks and European folks, right? And yeah, it's good to know theory, but the reality is like, do you know practice? Like, can you put this into practice, right? And then what about the theories that exist that haven't been published or like discussed, right? And so it's a huge issue. I mean, one thing that is tough too is like the communications and literacy MTEL, right? That can be challenging for multilingual people because English itself is like a really complicated language.
Yeah.
Homophones alone make 0 sense. We have words that sound the same, but mean different things and are spelled differently. And an I here might be silent, but an I somewhere else might not be. And so the English language itself is very complicated. And so a lot of Latino folks who tried to take that MTEL sometimes struggle with it, right? There's a wonderful, incredible woman in the district. Her name is Akita. And, you know, she is doing really great work behind the scenes. She is helping educators from all paths and all walks of life to tackle some of these MTELs for the same reason, because she's acknowledged, and some folks at the district level have been able to acknowledge that they are barriers to really talented people that could be doing great things for our kids. And so she actually does tremendous work in tutoring and prepping educators to pass these MTELs. And like, God, I don't even know how many MTELs I've taken at this point, but the ESL MTEL literally stumped me. It was such a hard MTEL to pass for me. And I have historically not been a great test taker anyway. So it was just like piling on all the barriers.
Too.
And with her help, she would come to my school. She would meet with me after hours.
Wow.
So we were there till like 6, 7 o'clock at night, like practicing tutoring, banging out, practice questions. And because of her, I was able to pass, right? And so there are people trying to dismantle the barriers, but we need more. And I know I'm going to jump the gun, but like your next question is about money and like where should the district and the city invest that money?
Yeah.
Like we need to invest the money in dismantling those barriers and getting really creative with opening up pathways for really talented people who want to be educators and who want to be social workers and who want to be guidance counselors and who want to be, heads of school to be able to do those things.
Right.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Since we're on to the next question, so it's basically asking over the next few years, BPS will receive $400 million from the government. If you were able to make decisions on how to spend the money, what would you use the money for to implement in the schools? Maria, you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I agree with Jen. Like, I think I would love to see everybody have a full support administrative team or transformation. I know the word transformation is a little icky in BPS right now, but a full transformation team or full admin team where you have like your leaders, you have your student supports, and you're fully staffed. There's no reason to delay anything. There's no reason to delay any services for any. Like, I feel like there's so much, a chunk of that should go building a school where we're servicing kids who are in between the IEPs. Like, even the special education is so like black and white too sometimes that, we got to send this kid to this school. Like, I wish there was like a school where we could just send our kids who are specifically acting out of trauma and we know it. And that's a place that they could be. But yes, I would love to see that money go into fully support, like having a full student support staff, having full leadership in place, and having every teacher have their support.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. Again, when you're saying it, all of a sudden we have all those funding, so we had that. So maybe with that money, like, there can be the transformation, just use that to reform education, especially MBPS and be create the change that we need. I've always told in this podcast that like the inequity in BPS, you can see it's clearly visible, and students know when they go to their school, they know how much care and investment is into their school because they know you can clearly see it. So and that tells them like how, because with those numbers, with those investment and those inequity, it's like the system give value on your kids. Like, if you go to those kids, this is your worth, based on the money they share. So and give to the school. So it's visible. So if we want our student to buy in to this, we have to care, and how we show we care about how much investment we put in, like how much support we put in for them, and not take away. Like, I remember before COVID, every year there was a budget cut. Every year there was a budget cut. Something was being cut. I remember I used to work for Boston Public School, and I remember the year I was leaving, they cut the library, they cut the extracurricular. I'm like, are you serious? So you saying me, you did a reevaluation of our student, and your reevaluation told us that our student have no need of those extracurricular, have no need of so we went from having a full-time librarian to a part-time librarian. I just couldn't understand that concept.
Yeah,
it was bogus. So I do hope in the future we no longer hear the term budget cuts and BBS, because one, it's putting the money that we already lost, adding more on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we end this wonderful conversation, talking about advocacy, and how we're gonna navigate through this another year pandemic. So I want to ask you guys, what are some self-care routine? What are some of your self-care routine as you navigate this pandemic? And we're gonna talk. I know Jen already shared a couple. We can add some more. Alejandra, do you want to start?
Sure. I dance. So I'm in a dance scene. So I dance bachata.
Awesome.
So that's I do that once a week. I practice a routine. I try to better my technique, and that moment the world goes silent. I also box, so I do that to just keep. It's an investment in my body, so I know that I carry a lot of energy, and as you all hear, I'm very passionate.
Yeah.
And my energy is very passionate, and so I could really get caught up in a lot of things. So I try to give myself like, I'm gonna do this so my body could take out anything it needs to take out, right? Because the only way our bodies naturally respond to what's going on around us is like we cry, we sweat, we vomit, or we have to use the bathroom, right? So I'm just naturally giving my body the opportunity to decompress through sweat. And also I think always peaking, like, I'm sorry, always investing in community, right? Spending time with folks that I love that don't drain me, like, and figuring out, I think when, especially social workers in general have this problem where we're constantly caretakers. So we'll step into that space and be that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been real intention in picking spaces where I don't have to be that person, and picking spaces where I get to exist and be present. And most importantly, we need to rest in order to keep fighting anything, racism, any ism, injustice, equity. Like, we need to be able to rest our bodies, and they need to be able to sleep, to just kind of recharge. So then we have the energy and the mindset we need the next day. So as I honor the kids, I want to honor myself in doing that, right? Like, so I could be better for them the next day and be in a better space. So those are things that I do for myself.
That's dope.
You know, I think so there are a couple of things I do like for my own self, and then things I do for myself in regards to work.
Okay.
And so like for my own self, you can find me at the nail salon every 2 weeks, getting a mani and a pedi. Like, that is my me time. Nobody bother me. I take my Kindle, which again, self-care, invest in a Kindle, y'all. It is awesome to just lose yourself in a book that has nothing to do with anything. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I should be reading educational books and like pedagogy books. And I'm like, no, I want to be reading about fairies and, wizards and warlocks and all that random stuff, and, sci-fi and all this dystopia. But reading, getting my nails done. And then actually, Rudy, you and Frank, you do this too, like just getting into nature, going out, going for a hike, getting away from cities, losing yourself in a forest somewhere, just kind of getting away from the daily hustle and bustle and like energy of a city is really important, I think, too. And nature is so powerful and rejuvenating, that there are times when I just like, I'll tell my husband, like, dude, let's just like go to Vermont somewhere, right? And like, I'm not taking my computer. I'm not taking I'm putting my phone on airplane mode. Nobody's gonna find me. I don't want to be around technology. So I think that's really important. And then in regards to work, it's not a secret, like boundaries, right? The boundaries are so important. And again, in a profession and in a field where like you're often pushed to be this kind of self-sacrificial lamb and like give your all the time and be on call 24/7. Like, no, we have families, we have our own needs, we have our own responsibilities outside of these spaces. So I actually have gotten into the habit, thankfully, of prepping my stuff for my Monday lessons and for my Monday classes. And then I turn off my computer right at 5 o'clock on Friday, and I do not open that computer up until Monday morning. No matter how much I want to, I don't do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That is our time. That is my weekend time. That is the time to like disengage. And in that same way, like, don't tell my kids this, my students, but like, I try really hard not to give them work on Fridays, because they also deserve to disengage and not be doing schoolwork on the weekend, right?
Awesome.
So, man, I would have loved you.
Y'all watching, Salazar doesn't like to give y'all work on the weekend, so
if you do get it, it's because you were probably being a beef jerky in class and wasting some class time. But
Yeah.
the goal is to try to not give you work on the weekends.
Yeah. No, this is very important. Like as you guys were saying, that's something that just came. Like as a person of color in work, it's 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 so hard doing self-care because one, you feel like you have to do 3 times the work of the white competitor to do. Like I always feel like I'm replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in place where I've seen my white counterpart took multiple days off. And for me and my culture, if I'm not in bed, like I'm not gonna take a day off, So I feel like, and you see the people thought, oh, this is another day off. They're like, well, why if I take a day off? Like, how would y'all feel if I start talking? People start talking. So it's just like I pay attention to those things now record. So, but which like I just started this self-care. Well, not just started, but practicing it more and just like if I need to take a day off, I'm gonna take it. Like, when was this? Like, it been mostly raining this summer, and then there was what was it like? I forgot when. We know on a Tuesday, it was gonna be sunny. I looked at my partner. Hey, we going to the beach. I just I put in my PTO. Like I'm out. Like I didn't even my phone. Like for the longest time, even if I take a day off, I'll bring my work phone with me. I'll be checking my email. This was the best PTO I ever taken. Like I was disconnected. I did not care because as you navigate this pandemic, and I know that you were saying like be conscious of your energy. You like I used to feel like I don't like awkward space. So because of that, my energy will try to fill up those awkward space. But no, like I'm managing my energy. I'm like, my energy is not needed. Like you can see somebody from, oh, Rudy, you awfully quiet. Like, no, it's not needed. I'm not gonna overcompensate anymore. Like, and being around people who doesn't drain you, they look like, it's an equal exchange. Definitely, like, so I'm like, hey, I have nothing against you. You can flourish over there. I'll flourish over here because I don't want to be drained from you.
Right.
So yeah, definitely. So it's important as people of color that we practice those self-care, especially if like sometimes you could feel like, like, because I know for me, like it was hard for me because of the amount of work I know I have to put in because I always think I'm replaceable as a person of color.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
I hear you naming that because I do feel like we automatically have this mentality as BIPOCs that we have to fight for our seat at the table, and that within itself is harmful with us. And then you realize there's something worse when you like go through the great first few days of work, and you're oh, we're so happy to have you here, and your ideas are taken into consideration. And over time, once you push in more, that kind of goes away. And you realize, oh, I don't have a seat at the table. I'm the plant in the middle of the table. I'm the decoration at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I think we don't realize how much that really does drain our mental health and our capacity to show up and be motivated at work. When that realization hits. So thank you for naming that, Ruby.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me too, it starts. I think I look back at center when like I felt like as a person of color, I always had to work 10 times harder than my white counterparts at school. And then it translated over into where I'm at now at work, where I'm just like, if I'm not working like harder, then it means like I'm failing, because that's how I felt at school. And the only reason why I came to that realization is because of therapy that I'm in. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm constantly overworking myself because of where I was at, where it was just a predominantly white institution. And like, I'm still working in a predominantly white system, and I'm just like, this is not good at all. So, I've been practicing self-care, going to the gym, making sure, I had a big problem in like working from home all the time, like on the weekends. My wife's like, you entering that email now, like it's not gonna change the answer, and
That's
like
me.
it can wait until Monday because you can't do anything about it now. You're at home. So like establishing my boundaries and everything like that, and it's been so much better. Um, so it's a constant like struggle and growth for me. So
I'm gonna add one more thing. Too, it's also like when your supervisor email you late at night. It's
yeah, and you gotta answer.
like, so I need to be working too. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But yeah, so thank you again for this conversation. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we get you guys to come back again. Yeah, thank you again.
yes, and we'll be back with our final thoughts. We are back. Welcome back, everyone. We are here with our final thoughts. What do you think, Rudy?
Yeah, great conversation. Definitely enjoy it. Like, it's I think Jen mentioned some of the stuff we say, like, definitely when we think about celebration, like, how do we better support? We have to know, understand, like, who our population is. Like, the more we know our students, the better we're gonna be at uh celebrating their culture.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, it was such a fruitful conversation. And when thinking about, you know, the people that we have working in BPS and talking about representation, it encourages me to know that we have individuals like that working with our students,
yeah,
especially for us when, you know, so much of our work is kind of individualized. Like me being a counselor, I'm solely like, I know it takes a team, but like the some of the work is just so like one on one with the student.
yeah,
To know that, I may have a teacher that's actually focused on doing the actual work,
yeah.
or another counselor that is, or social worker that is
Mhm.
doing the actual work. It's so encouraging to hear, and that, well, I'm not in the fight alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So I think it's just dope that we're able to have these conversations and to highlight their voices, of what they're going through or how they're helping students, or what they think that we can do to make the
better.
system meaning educational system, BPS, better.
Yeah,
Super super dope, and I definitely look forward to kind of having more conversations like this.
definitely. Yeah. Even like people listening or watching,
Yeah.
let us know what is the proper way, or how can we celebrate Hispanic heritage or any culture uh beyond the 30 days all year round
Yeah.
in our education system. Like, like is there any school out there who are doing it? Is there a teacher who are doing it? How do you using cultural in your curriculum and your class every day?
Yes.
Yeah,
How do we help ELL students? Because a
yeah,
lot of the times, some of our students are, yes, the Haitian population that come from other countries, but we have a big Spanish population too that are ELL students. Like, how do we help them? How can the system like BPS help them with curriculum or any ideas, or tell us what you're doing in your classroom or in your school that benefits these students as well.
yeah.
And we look forward to hearing from you. Please, 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 if you haven't already checked out part 1, go check out part 1. And let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Straight out of BPS.
Podcast.
Peace out, everybody.
It was Rudy and Hootie Jamar.